File items 91 through 99, pass and retain. File item 100, AB 2559, Frazier. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2559 by Assemblymember Frazier, an act relating to highways.
Mr. Frazier, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker and members, AB 2559 modifies the requirements for the location of tourist-based directional signs to visitor centers within 2 miles from the highway rather than the current half-mile distance. This is a common-sense reform that will help direct more tourists to tourist information in communities throughout the state. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no debate, the clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Aye 71, no 0. The measure passes. File items 101 through 103, pass and retain. File item 104, AB 2820. Chu, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2820 by Assemblymember David Chu, an act relating to crimes.
Mr. Chu, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. AB 2820 will strengthen current law that is supposed to protect Californians from price gouging during a declared emergency. This bill idea was brought to my attention by our Attorney General, and I thank her for her support. Current law is not supposed to allow price increases of more than 10% after certain declared emergencies, but following the devastating Aliso Canyon gas leak, unscrupulous individuals took advantage of loopholes to price gouge desperate residents. We saw landlords in nearby areas double or triple rent prices and towing companies that charge outrageous prices to residents who had to abandon vehicles to flee to safety. This bill strengthens protections against price gouging after a state of emergency is declared by the President, our governor, or a local governing body, by extending current prohibitions against rent price gouging from 30-day leases to include leases up to a year, prohibiting towing and transportation services from raising rents more than 10%, and clearly applying these protections to man-made disasters. This measure has enjoyed bipartisan support, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Obernolte, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, no one disputes that price gouging in time of emergency is unconscionable. That's why it is illegal under current California state law. This bill attempts to add rental housing to the list of things effective under that statute in response to the recent Aliso Canyon gas leak and the higher rental prices there. Colleagues, I think we need to acknowledge that sometimes higher commodity prices serve a useful function. In a local emergency, higher rental housing prices incentivize those who can live further away or make other arrangements to do so, leaving that rental housing available to those who truly need it. If we interfere with the market principles and economic principles at work here, we guarantee that housing will only be available to those quickest to seize it, leaving it unavailable to those who need it the most, and that's why I urge a no vote.
Mr. Rodriguez, you're recognized.
Speaker and members, I rise in support of 2820. As chair of the Joint Legislative Committee on Emergency Management, after disaster, we shouldn't victimize survivors twice by allowing opportunists to criminally gouge them. This is a reasonable bill to protect Californians during emergencies. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Wagner, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I do have to rise in opposition. I want to echo the comments of my good friend from the Lake Arrowhead area and give a concrete example of those principles in action and why, despite the fact no one on this floor has any sympathy whatsoever for price gougers, we need to let the market operate. I believe the story comes out of the Hurricane Katrina debacle, but the principle, whether it was that natural disaster or another one, applies regardless of where and when. Here's the experience that was related in a newspaper article that I had read related to one of those natural disasters. There were homes destroyed. There were folks who needed hotels, some sort of rental property, and what you would find is those with the most wealth would be the ones who would go and get a hotel room for themselves and a hotel room for their kids and maybe a hotel room for the boys and a hotel room for the girls. And suddenly we found there weren't hotel rooms available for the vast majority of folks who needed them. Why? Because a select few, limited or with unlimited resources or with sufficient resources, could sop up all of the supply, allow the market to work, and suddenly that person who's taking down 3 units says to himself or herself, you know, I'll just take the 1, and the family will all huddle together and we'll get through this together. And by the way, that'll free up 2 more in my example, and hundreds more when magnified across the economy, hundreds of additional spaces for other people who are in need. So there's a reason to let the market work, and this bill interferes with that. And you can see that while we have no truck with those who will abuse their fellow citizens in time of emergency, the opportunity for the market to work and to apportion out these rental spaces in time of need is something we should not interfere with, because you will end up doing more damage and hurting more people and leaving more people to fend for themselves otherwise. So a well-intentioned bill going to what is certainly a problem, price gouging, but in the market, well, that law of unintended consequences is something we cannot get around in this legislature. Vote no on this one. Let's come back. Let's think about a way to do it narrowly and to avoid that problem that will happen in the next emergency if we're not careful.
Mr. Gallagher, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, members, I rise in support of this bill, and I urge people to support it as well. As someone who comes from a district who's faced natural disasters from flood and fires. I remember as a young man seeing the flood in the Yuba Sutter area and being out on levee watch and seeing the devastation afterwards. People in a very vulnerable situation. We should ensure that there are protections against price gouging, especially in these emergency situations. So I urge your support for this measure, and thank you.
Mr. Frazier, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As a general contractor in the state of California and living through the Loma Prieta earthquake and also the Oakland firestorm and seeing the devastation that had been done, that the victims had been persecuted not only by criminals but also con men, this is not a bill that will damage anybody's ability to make money. This is ability to actually help people in distress. I ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Chu, would you like to close?
Thank you. First of all, colleagues, I very much appreciate the conversation. I want to thank our colleagues, including our colleague from Yuba City and others who have understood how important the current law that we have on the books that prevents price gouging has been. This is a very narrowly tailored bill. This bill simply says in a number of instances where we have seen in recent disasters, in recent emergencies, price gouging, that the intent of the law that has been on the books stay in place. With all due respect to our good colleague from Big Bear, who was the one no vote in appropriations on this bill, current law does govern price gouging with regards to rental housing. It says that if you have leases of 30 days or less, you can't price gouge. What we saw after Aliso Canyon, though, was that there were leases between 30 days and a year where there was significant price gouging. We saw rents go up from $3,000 a month to $10,000 a month. So I appreciate the perspective of some who believe that the free market should absolutely sway. I happen to think after a president has declared an emergency, after a governor has declared an emergency, or after your city council has declared an emergency, for at least a brief period of time, we should say in those areas we want to allow our residents to have access to housing, to have access for transportation. With that, colleagues, I want to make sure that we're not doubly victimizing victims, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 65, noes 11. The measure passes. File items 105 to 110 pass and retain. Second day consent calendar. Does any member wish to remove any items from the consent calendar? Seeing and hearing none, the clerk will read the second day consent calendar.
Assembly Bill 2138 by Assemblymember Lowe and others, an act relating to business.
The clerk will open the roll on the consent calendar. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 78, noes 0. The consent calendar is adopted. The clerk will read the remaining bills on the second day consent calendar.
Assembly Bill 1709.
Ayes 78, noes 0.
Assembly Bill 2761.
Ayes 78, noes 0.
Assembly Bill 1977.
Ayes 78, noes 0.
Assembly Concurrent Resolution 148.
Ayes 78, noes 0.
And Senate Joint Resolution 18.
Ayes 78, noes 0. Mr. Ridley Thomas, you are recognized.
Yes, I'd ask that file item with 96 be, the call be lifted.
Mr. Ridley Thomas would like to lift the call on file item 39.
39, my apologies. File item 39.
Clerk will lift the call. This is for file item 39. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. Takes 54.
Close the roll.
Clerk will close the roll and tally the votes.
Madam Speaker, I'd ask for reconsideration.
Granted.
You gotta announce the vote first.
Oh, sorry. Ayes 51, noes 0. Noes, measure fails. Mr. Ridley Thomas, you'd like to be granted consideration?
I would with your indulgence, Madam Speaker.
Notice is granted.
He notices reconsideration.
Notice is reconsideration. We will now move to announcements and adjournments in memory. The following members were granted prior permission to speak on adjourn in memory. Assemblymember Gibson, Hadley, Jones, and Olson. Members, please take your seats for the adjourns in memories. Mr. Gibson, you are recognized for your adjournment in memory.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise today in adjourn memory of Pastor Ernest Waters, born May 19th, 1950. Pastor Waters was raised in a small town in Louisiana. The youngest of 9 children, Pastor Waters excelled in a number of areas in his childhood. Most notably, he was an outstanding football player and attended Morgan State University. January 1990, Pastor Waters was employed by the Metro for 26 years before retiring. While in Metro, Pastor Waters served as ASME Local 3634's president from 2006 to 2015, representing over 700 Metro line supervisors. He was also the vice president of the executive board of ASME Council 36 for 2 years. He was an effective leader in his capacity as president of ASME, representing Metro workers. In his personal life, Pastor Waters shared his life with his wife, Shirley Waters, and their 4 children, 9 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. He also was a pastor of the New Way Missionary Baptist Church in Watts, Los Angeles, California. Members, I would respectfully ask that we adjourn our meeting in the memory of Pastor Ernest Waters.
Mr. Hadley, you are recognized for your adjournment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today I rise to adjourn in the memory of Victor Abe, born Hiroshi, who passed away on April 7th, 2016, at the age of 95. Born in Los Angeles in 1920, Victor attended LA Polytechnic High School and went on to UCLA and UC Berkeley, where he studied engineering until the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Vic was drafted in February 1942, just 1 week after his family and many other West Coast Japanese Americans were ordered into prison camps, incarceration camps located in non-coastal interior states. After completing boot camp and moving his family into an internment camp in Wyoming, Vic worked for the Army and then with the Secret Military Intelligence Service, known today as MIS. After the war, Vic helped his family rebuild their lives and relocate to Gardena in the South Bay of Los Angeles. His career as a structural engineer spanned more than 40 years, with a specialty in earthquake engineering, handling inspections, and retrofitting buildings to withstand future quakes. In 2011, Vic was awarded the Congressional Gold Medal to Nisei veterans. This award is given to the Japanese-American World War II veterans who in many cases served their country while grave injustice was being delivered to them and their families. Vic is survived by his wife Esther, daughters Vicky and Verna, brother Louis Abe, sister-in-law Agnes Fukumoto, and many nieces and nephews. I request that we adjourn in the memory of Victor Abe.
Mr. Jones, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Today I ask that we adjourn in the memory of B.W. Stoney Stone, who is also known as Mr. East County of Santee, passed away peacefully in his home Wednesday, April 20th, surrounded by his family and loved ones. He was born in Mesa, Arizona in 1925. He served in the Army Air Forces from 1943 to 1946. Stoney married his beautiful wife, Bonnie, in 1955. During their 54-year marriage, he and she had 5 children, 4 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. Stoney's first business venture was a market he opened in El Cajon called Stoney's Rock and Roll Market. After the family closed the market, Stoney ventured into the banking industry and became president of Cajon Valley Bank. He retired in early 2000 from Temecula Valley Bank. Stoney's greatest passion, aside from his family, was helping underprivileged children. From that passion, he founded the East County Toy and Food Drive, now headed into its 41st year. It is now estimated that directly due to Stoney's efforts and initiative, $50,000 to $60,000 is raised for families and the children of East County through the Toy and Food Drive annually. Over 20,000 families and over 50,000 children have been assisted by Stoney's annual East County Toy and Food Drive. 24 years ago, Stoney received a call from the El Cajon Police requesting assistance in seeking funds for a DARE program. Stoney called some business acquaintances, and they formed a nonprofit organization to raise money for the program. From that effort, it evolved into Stoney's Kids, and now Stoney's Kids Legacy. Through Stoney's Kids, Stoney was able to continue to assist underprivileged kids throughout the year. Stoney's Kids has raised $800,000 since 1991 to fund programs and provide needs for East County's kids. It became known as a culture of generosity. Stoney's other civic responsibilities and accomplishments include in 1967, Man of the Year for the San Diego Imperial Counties Grocers Association, 1970, Mother Goose Parade Association President, 1987, Citizen of the Year in the City of El Cajon, 1996, winner of the C. Allen Paul Award for the San Diego East County Chamber of Commerce, and finally in 2005, the American Red Cross Real Hero Humanitarian Award for the San Diego and Imperial Counties. Members, thank you for joining me today in adjourning in the memory of Stoney Stone. Thank you.
Assemblymember Olson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. It is with a heavy heart that I adjourn in the memory of Julie Soderlund, a young woman that many here in the Capital community knew well. Julie passed away on April 28th at the age of just 38 after a 9-month battle with melanoma cancer. Julie was known for her positive spirit, faith, love of life, and her hard work and dedication to those she served. She worked in the press office of Governor Schwarzenegger, Carly Fiorina's Senate campaign, and served as a consultant and communications expert to a number of other Republican candidates as well. Julie was a well-respected member of our Capital community. In a Facebook message announcing her passing, John Myers said that reporters liked her even when they fought with her, and that it was the highest compliment a Politico could ever earn in their eyes. Julie was keenly aware of the challenges that women face working in politics. To that end, she co-founded Girls on the Grid, and for those of you who have never visited Girls on the Grid, I encourage you to do so. She did so with the goal of giving professional women a place to share their stories of living and working in Sacramento. Julie was fearless in combating what she referred to as the detour of her life. She started a blog called My Detour de Force to document her journey with cancer. In it, she shared with us her hopes, dreams, fears, humor, and perseverance. In spite of her circumstances, her love and faith in the Lord only grew more with each passing day. Julie is survived by her husband, Eric, her parents, Donald and Susan, and her brother, Michael. The spirit and joy of Julie will continue to live on in them and in her many, many friends across the state. Members, please join me in adjourning in the memory of many of our friends of Julie Sutherland.
Members, please bring the names to the desk to be printed in the journal. All requests to adjourn in memory will be deemed read and printed in the journal. Moving to announcements, the session schedule is as follows: Tuesday, May 10th, check-in session; Wednesday, May 11th, check-in session; Thursday, May 12th, floor session at 9 a.m. All other items remaining will be passed and retained. All motions shall be continued. Seeing and hearing no further business, I am ready to entertain a motion to adjourn. Ms. Brown and Mr. Nazarian seconds that the House will stand in adjournment until Thursday, May 12th at 9 a.m. Quorum call is lifted.